Hi, I'm Pete, and welcome to Just a Few Acres Farm. This is the Farmall 856 Restoration Episode 11. See what I did there? In this episode, we're going to tear down the PTO unit, see what it needs. We're going to tear down the brakes, see what they need, and finish buttoning up the covers and the transmission brake on this midsection. First, the PTO unit here. What I did is I threaded two of the long mounting bolts back in so I could stand it up on those, plus the PTO shaft to get it nice and level on the bench. This unit consists of an oil inlet here. Here's the input shaft that comes from the transmission. And then there's a hydraulic pump here that's fed by this inlet tube. A clutch pack down here which engages and disengages the PTO. And then down in this case you have gear sets to convert it to the right speed. And in the bottom you have both a 540 RPM and a 1000 RPM PTO shaft. First to come off is the pump and the housing that the pump mounts to. I don't know what I'm yik-yakking about here, probably what I had for breakfast, but my microphone cut out. There's a couple things I want you to know about these PTO units. Number one, they were common to a whole bunch of international tractors. The 06 series, the 56 series, the 66 series, the 68 series, and some of the early 86 series. The other thing is, why are there two shafts sticking out of this thing, 540 RPM and 1000 RPM? Well, the reason is as horsepower increased in tractors and you want to transmit that back to trailing implements, if you increase the speed to 1000 RPM, you could carry twice the horsepower without increasing the torque on the shaft. So that means the shaft doesn't need to double in size. All of the mechanisms in the implement, the U-joints, the bearings, everything can be smaller rotating at 1000 RPM, just the same way that the gears in a transmission are a lot smaller than in the final drive of a tractor, because those final drive gears are rotating slower and take more torque and need to be bigger. Here's that piece I just pulled off. Oil pickup goes to a gear type pump here that's driven off of this shaft, and it's just two gears that spin against each other and pressurize the oil. The pressurized oil comes down through this tube here and goes to the lower housing in this hole. Now inside you've got this shaft which drives the pump, but it also runs straight through to this big gear here which engages the clutches. And the clutches are in this drum right here. You can see them stacked up in here, and there's a hydraulic cylinder below this that'll push those clutches together when you engage the PTO. The next step is to remove the clutches, and there's just a big snap ring here that needs to come out. And the clutches can lift out. There's a bunch of them. Here's the clutch pack. It's a lot like what was in the torque amplifier, although we didn't see them because we didn't take it apart. And what you have alternating in here are pairs of discs that don't have teeth on the inside, along with little clutch rings which do have teeth on the inside, and those teeth engage that gear that I showed you in the top pump unit that I took off first. So these are spinning all the time, but when the hydraulic piston in it compresses this whole pack together, then the driven discs that have the teeth on the inside of them, I can't get it apart, like this, are driving these discs which have these little ears on the outside of them, and those ears on the steel discs sit in these slots so they engage the drum. So the clutch is transmitting power from the inside, the gear that's driving on the inside, when it's compressed, to driving this drum on the outside. And these clutches are in need of replacement. So these discs, some of them look all right. Those two are all right. When you get to the clutch material, see how it's come off there? You got shiny spot, you got not shiny spot. That's where the facing has all come off, so you're not making good contact on that. And then you can see where some of the steels run hot and burned from those clutches slipping. The inner plates are pretty burned. That one's scored and burned. Seeing the state of the clutches, I'm going to go further into this unit. You could just replace the clutches, but now I'm thinking about piston seals and other seals. To do that, I got to compress this giant spring in here to get this snap ring off to pull this out. This is a simple homemade tool to do that work. Just some all-threaded plate, a couple 3/8 bolts. This snap ring right here needs to come out. Or is it a retaining ring? I don't know. It's always a good day when I get to remove a snap ring. Now we can slowly release the tension on the spring. Now I'm going to pull the clutch piston under here, but first there's a snap ring here. Wow, that's loose. There's an outer seal here which is definitely going to need replacement. And then there's an inner O-ring to replace. Now I need to get this clutch carrier drum off because there's some brake pads under here to look at. To do that, I got to push the drum down and take that snap ring off. The brake springs are pushing up on this a little bit, but it's nothing like the mainspring, so I think I can just pull the snap ring without pushing it down. That was loads of fun. I should do this every day. Oh man. We've got seals on the bottom of this drum here, 2 of them, and 3 little brake buttons here that are in really poor shape. Now this should separate the rest of the way. Here's the gear set. The shaft that runs straight through the unit back into the transmission is the 1000 shaft. Then you've got an idler gear here and the 540 shaft gear here. These are the 3 brake pads and they're replaceable. They're hydraulic pistons, so they've got seals on them, and then they have big springs underneath them. Here are the bores that those brake pads ride in. And when the unit's pressurized and the clutches are pushed together, the pressure comes into these bores as well and forces them off so that the brakes are disengaged. And then when the pressure leaves, when the clutches are disengaged, the pressure leaves out of here and the springs push the brake pads into the bottom of that clutch drum. This is the bore that this clutch carrier rides in with these 2 seals, and you can see where the 2 seals rode in here, and you just want to make sure that there's no wear in there, which there's not in my case. Same with the piston bores, although they're not quite as big a deal as that main bore. I don't feel anything on those either. Let's finish with this before we get to the valve. So these guys just lift off. This idler gear should just lift out. A couple needle bearings in there. Got a bronze bushing on the idler, or bronze face bushing. Idler shaft. Oh, look at the sludge in there. That's why we take them apart. I'm going to pull the 2 PTO shafts so that I can replace the seals while I'm into this. And of course, there's another snap ring. Must be the snap ring salesman was at the plant the day they designed this. said you need some more snap rings in there. That's 1000 shaft with a big old bearing on it. Finally, the 540 shaft. We got a spacer here and another snap ring. You're supposed to pop right out, you know. We rehearsed this. .540 shaft. That's it for this case, ready for cleanup. You can see the inside of the 540 RPM seal and the 1000 seal over there, easy to replace at this point. Outside the 540 seal, you've got a couple bushing washers that you need to keep track of. And there's a bronze washer finally in the 540 PTO that I think needs to stay intact when you knock that seal out of there for the new one. Back to this case, the valve is integral to the case. It's a spool valve that runs right down here. You see engage and disengage the PTO. Real simple spool. You can see the holes in here and the spools just open and close against these holes. My memory is that this spool comes out the bottom. The linkage at the top unscrews. There's a collar. And there's a seal under here, underneath this, but to get it out, we've got to take the bottom plug off. Plug with O-ring. There's the spool. This is the spool that actuates the whole thing. And in this spool is a very famous little piece. It's called the Judas pin because it betrays you. There's a little tiny pin that hooks these two halves together, and if that pin breaks, your hydraulics don't work anymore. Pretty common to happen. This one is fine. Just a couple last pieces to strip this down for cleaning. Top seal on the spool valve. You're on there. Wowie. O-ring lip seal. Spring. Spring retainer and bushing washer. They go on just like that. Keep track of parts. We put it back together. That goes on there. That goes on there. That plug goes down there. That's the whole assembly. All the parts ready for cleaning. Here's the cases. There's a spool valve back there. Over here is all the guts, the gears, the clutches, the clutch carrier, the pump. Before I opened it, I didn't know how many hours were on this PTO unit, but I think quite a bit. There was paint on the seals on the shafts, which means the tractor had been painted since the last time it was rebuilt. It needs new seals, new clutch pack, new brake pads, pretty much the whole shot. I can clean up everything, check the bearings. Meanwhile, I can get the parts ordered for it. Here's one more clue to the hours on it. This is the inlet suction screen. It's kind of a sock that goes inside there. Can you see how clogged up it is? Oh my gosh. Onto the brakes, because I'm ordering parts for these at the same time. Huh. Get this pin out. Other side. These are shims to properly adjust the preload on these cone bearings here. There's one here, there's one inside. This is the bull pinion shaft. The bull gear is right back here out to the axle. Just like on the older Farmalls, the brakes are in the same position in the powertrain. Oh, there's still another one. They just keep coming. Here's a shot down in. You can see the bull gear back there. Very wide. This last casting that I pulled out has the brake piston in it. It's this thing. And it's kind of sticky, so I'm going to try something. The compressor's only got 40 psi in it. There we go. Look at in here, inside where the piston was, all this sludge in here, and then on the piston itself, I'm sure that this was the down face of it. Wow, that can't be good. The way these brakes work bears a fair resemblance to the way the PTO clutch pack works. Same principle, pushing things together to get them to grab. This is the piece that goes right against the tractor body, and the hydraulic piston is in here. There's O-rings on both sides of it. So this piece will move in and out with hydraulic pressure that comes from the line here, and there's a little port in here that just pressurizes that void and pushes on this. Of course, this side is mated up with this side, and there's an empty drum in here. It's got a braking surface here, and just like on the Super C, you've got brake discs that sit down in here, two of them, but between the two discs you have this plate that's another friction plate that they will ride against when the brake is depressed. Let me get this together correctly. Second brake disc, so really you've got 4 friction surfaces at work here, each side of 2 brake discs. Another plate. And then on this side, and it came off when I pulled this one side off. The other one's still intact, but on this piston face you have, this looks like braking material, but it's really, I guess, just a shim to bring everything into the correct distance. Apparently they don't wear out because there isn't rotation between the two of these. So I'm going to have to clean this one up and glue it back on. If I can ever find a glue that'll hold to this greasy stuff. If I pull this drum back apart, these 4 little buttons here are the adjusters, and I can pull those right out. And my supplier, Joe, Red Run Right, said that there's, I don't know, a procedure to adjusting these that really needs to be conveyed verbally. So I got to get on the horn with him before I put these back together and talk about that. These brakes certainly are in need of a good cleaning and all new seals around the piston and the housing where it goes onto the pinion shaft. But the discs themselves are fine. They're not all that worn. They just need to be scuffed up a little bit and they'll be good to go back in. I don't need new ones of those. That's good news. Finally, we can put the covers on the transmissions. Get everything buttoned up here. I put a little spray high tack on both sides of the gasket, and then you just got to align these grooves to the forks, which takes a little finagling. You got to be up in gear, you got to be in neutral. There. These bolts on the side need some washers temporarily because the shifting and steering wheel support sits here, so they won't seat all the way down into the blind holes without some washers until that piece goes on much later. Check the shifting. Should be 4 stops. 1, 2, 3, 4. Low, neutral, high shifter in neutral. Reverse shifter not in reverse. Park lock shim so it doesn't pull the cover to one side. Transmission dipstick. The next cover is the one that holds the transmission brake, and I got to replace the pad. Not too complicated. Here's a new pad. It's some kind of metallic substance. A little blue thread locker on the screw. And then it has to go back together in the cover. There's a new O-ring on the shaft here that seals it. And I have to put a Woodruff key in here. There's a pin that rides in a slot in the shaft to hold it together this way. There. Then there's a retaining ring that goes on this side to control movement the other way. Well, I put this on backwards. And then you can have the pleasure of taking it all back apart again because I put the pad on backwards. We do things right because we do them twice. That pad right there has to ride on that gear back there. Unlike working on earlier Farmalls, almost nothing in the powertrain of this tractor's got lock washers on the bolts. Well, this tractor was made in '69. Maybe NASA figured out by then that lock washers didn't really do anything. Although I do like using them just for the purpose of keeping the corners of the bolts from digging into the metal when they seat. But there were none here and none in the parts manual. They would be listed, so none are going back in. And then just ahead of that we have the bottom cover on the clutch housing, which you would take off to grease the throwout bearing. No gasket or sealant or anything on this cover. The clutch housing's dry, and there's a drain hole right there from anything that does happen to get into it. And then finally, the coup de grace, the pièce de résistance. I don't know French, but that seemed appropriate. This inner plate here is a timing pointer. There's marks on the flywheel to time the engine. And then it has a cover plate over it. There you have it, making progress one step at a time. I'm certainly not going to finish this winter, but that's okay. It's something I work on when I have time. I have parts coming for the PTO and the brakes. They'll be here in a couple days and we'll put it all back together and keep marching ahead. That will finish really the rear part of the tractor, and then I can go forward and take care of the front main seal and the engine. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you next time.